I think we'll send an email in 30 seconds. So, did you guys? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm just coming out on me. Thanks for being here.
You been good?
Not bad. That's all available. You never know if these
Oh, yeah.
they can make up pretty good.
No problem. I'll take mine up. Thank you. How are you, man? Good to see you. Good. So we heard sympathy from the woman on the boat.
She actually was like, I was talking from Chicago, and she's like, I can get 3 minutes.
That's right.
She's like, I'll take them. I was like, no, you can't.
Works for me.
Like,
Waves around.
yeah.
Is there even one here?
No, it's not, but I just wanted to be this side of the road.
Oh, you make me. You know what? They put my name here. Okay.
It's a weird
Great.
arrangement.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't even like you out here. I don't even like you out here. Yeah.
Hey, Aaron, how you doing?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
I'll balance out this crowd here a little bit.
From you, right? Oh. From last meeting, and then one more.
Hi, Aaron.
I was on the because, like I said, I missed the last one.
What did the last one say we approved the previous one?
Well, that's a good point, actually. I'll check right now.
You may have it on here.
Oh, I'd rather have it.
Excuse me, I'm gathering.
Thank you. Of course you are.
I'm going to get to the point that I don't need as much.
Oh, wait, that's little.
I'm not at that point yet.
You're not there yet?
No. I'm always going to have to use paper. Okay, because I write notes.
I like drawing.
Oh, you gave the overview last time.
Drawing charts.
So you should do it.
I want to put the things hang out.
That's right.
That's okay.
Okay.
People know who we are by now, right?
Okay, are we good? TJ stuff is on if we want to. Do you want to do that? Are you on this report?
Yeah,
TJ?
mention it. Oh, yeah, I've been keeping up on that closely.
She's got a PowerPoint.
I see.
So we'll just.
Yeah, I won't do as good a job as TJ, but I'll try.
Where are we? Somebody have the picture sign?
It's 6:01.
Oh, yeah, you guys can
Okay. Time to roll. Yeah. Is that okay?
Try it.
Hello, good evening. We'll call the meeting to order for the Elbel Advisory Committee. Make sure you're in the right room, but this is the hottest deal in town, so I'm sure you are.
It's cheap ticket.
Cheap ticket. Committee members, we'll maybe introduce ourselves again for anyone who might be new in attendance.
Dan Farrell from the Parks Board.
I'm Randy Kelly.
Councilmember Joe Broden.
Aaron Perry, Executive Director of Parks.
Councilmember Karen White.
John Bordy, interested party.
And also a councilman.
City councilman,
All right, thank you.
not part of the official committee.
All right. As far as tonight's agenda, we did not post that online in advance, but there are copies available at the front of the room. And we'll also scroll that up on the AV resources to both sides here. First item on the agenda is a recap of the Elbel Park resolution, just to kind of refocus us after some time off and some spring breaks and some very busy schedules on everybody's part. So Karen, if you would help with that.
Thank you. I would like to personally begin by thanking the members of the advisory board, administration, our staff, and you, the citizens, for your input and for allowing us to really move forward on this very critical issue. The process has been an excellent one. I have enjoyed coming to the meetings, and as I stated at our last meeting, I do plan to take up golfing. Not necessarily in the near future, but I'm going to take up golfing. The charge before me is to give a recap of the Elbel Park resolution. On February the 8th, the Common Council passed a resolution setting forth some expectations, some guidelines, but also in terms of looking at how the advisory committee would be able to address the issue that is before us. A very important section of the resolution dealt with that we welcome public input and transparency in government, and we set forth the membership of the advisory board, one current member of the South Bend Board of Parks Commissioners, one current city administrator selected by the mayor, and that is Mr. Aaron Perry, 3 members from the South Bend Common Council, with at least one being a current member of the Parks, Recreation, Culture, Arts, and Entertainment Committee. The duties and the responsibilities, we set forth 6 duties and / responsibilities. 1, that all meetings would be consistent with the Indiana open door law. 2, to develop strategies and action plans based on proven data, addressing all reasonable and viable short and long-term options on the feasibility of the 313 acres currently used as Elbel Golf Course. 3, to receive input from the public from resource persons who may be experienced in financial, real estate, fund development projects, private or other sector golf operations with present or past experiences. Develop such information in format which is sent to the office of the city clerk for dissemination to the Common Council, the Board of Park Commissioners, and the mayor within 45 days. As most of you might be aware, our first meeting was set for February the 29th, and that's when Mother Nature visited the community, so we had to move back. So this meeting that's being held today, which is April the 13th, we would be very close within the 45 days that was set forth in the resolution. And then to share information which supports the advisory recommendation, and to send representatives of the special Elbel Advisory Committee to any public meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners and the South Bend Common Council to discuss their advisory recommendations in a timely and well-documented manner. So these are the goals and the responsibilities that were set forth in the resolution. Again, I believe that this has been an excellent process. We have allowed public input, and a lot of work has gone into getting us to this point at this particular time.
Thank you, Karen. If we could move right along then, Randy, if you might help with the recap and for the intent of approving the minutes of our last meeting.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to, and being as how I wasn't at the last meeting, I'll recap from the minutes, do the best I can. I do notice here that one thing mentioned was the Councilwoman White thanked the City Clerk's office for taking such comprehensive minutes, and clearly you have as I've been scrolling through. So I'd like to offer my thanks as well. Began by TJ giving an update on the course as it stands right now. A lot of openings have been posted for cashiers, maintenance workers, and so on, and getting the course ready for the upcoming season. Aaron Perry, the plan is to work on the following weeks, should be very close to done. We're around $100,000 for season pass sales so far, as it turns out. Aaron Perry noted that the Park Board did set the season rates back to 2015 levels, noting that it probably isn't the year to look at any major pricing strategy changes. TJ also stated they just came out with an all-new website for the golf course, actually for the golf system as a whole. And after Councilwoman Roden asked about the state of concessions, TJ responded that Elbel has received again a 5-star rating from the Health Department for the 3rd consecutive year. Elbel for Everyone made a presentation on the current and potential complementary uses for Elbel Park, and it was noted that complementary uses do need to fit with golf as the existing priority of the park moving forward. There are already many current and complementary activities taking place at Elbel, including residents meeting on Sundays for birding, local high school athletics, golf and cross-country, sledding, cross-country skiing, and wildlife photography. Jen Betts gave a presentation on prospective ideas for complementary uses and spoke about the possibilities of developing an app for Elbel that could have information for all the complementary use information. Chris Cobb suggested the park board establish a subcommittee for complementary uses. Aaron then gave a presentation on the path forward for Elbel from the department's perspective, and the presentation consisted of 4 major points for the department. The department sees as its guideposts. First, as this committee recommended, the City of South Bend will operate Elbel as a golf course. In 2016, engage golf course management consulting firm. Third, empower an ecological study of Elbel Park. And fourth, create a national resource management plan for the park and other major parks. Let's see. And the final piece is to establish a natural resource management plan for Elbel, and then in the future for the other major parks as well. And a fifth project going forward, after hearing a presentation by Elbel for Everyone, would be to establish some type of permanent vehicle for the residents to participate in the Parks Department because this process has shown that there is a need. The full minutes are online, if I'm not mistaken, so these are all available to anyone that would like to read the full minutes. So with that, I'd like to move that we accept the minutes as written.
Second?
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Accept the minutes, enter them into our official record. Next item on the agenda, and thank you, Randy, for that very capable recap, despite your not being here. I appreciate it, but we've all had an opportunity to look at those in advance, so thank you, though. Just turning to the quick, short presentation area of tonight's agenda. Legal use, some questions had arisen in the past, and just a little bit of follow-up or update, and I don't know how the two of you want to handle things, or...
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a brief background of why the city feels that, I mean, I can answer a variety of questions. I can give you the legal background for why the city feels like it's got, why the Parks Board has the power to enter into lease agreements. I can go that direction. I can speak to your specific question, because I know that was one question you had asked earlier in the process. I can speak to your earlier question as to ownership rights of Mud Lake. It's really sort of what the board or the committee here would like to hear. And so with that and with deferring to Kathy, I would just welcome questions here from you guys, and that way we can sort of address as many different topics as you guys
Sure,
want to
great.
get.
Thanks for that format.
I think the first point that you raised in regards to the ownership and authority that the park board has, to clarify that and to really share with not only the advisory board but the audience, information that you have on that. The first point that you just raised.
Sure. I think that as the process has unfolded,
Can everyone hear, or do we not have that mic on?
If you can pull that mic
If you don't
right
mind, Mike, thanks.
I just need a third grader to teach me how to use it.
Just put it close to
You can
you.
pull it all
We
the
also-
So
way
it's already
over.
plugged in?
Yeah, it's ready to go.
Yeah, you're ready to go. You're live.
Everybody, is that better?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
So, let me get my notes here. As going back to where I was, I think that there was sort of an immediate and unfortunate disconnect with where Parks Board was coming from with the Elbel process and what the community understood the Parks Board's obligation under the statutes were. And I think the initial step was really supposed to be one of just making a statement, a public statement that what the uses of the Parks Board were in the ongoing plan, what the financial statement was guiding the Parks Board, and their statement was really supposed to be one to the mayor's office of saying, all right, Mayor, it's up to you as to what you want to do with this particular property. We'll be supportive. This is not necessarily an absolute necessity of the Parks Department, going forward. At that point, then it's up to the mayor to bring forward a resolution to council to make a determination of whether to sell city parks property. As that process evolved, and we had excellent feedback from the community, and it allowed for an opportunity for everybody to sort of learn the process, the next stage of the sort of the Elbel discussion started to veer its way towards a potential lease. And leasing under the statute is governed by 3610-311, but essentially the Parks Board has, in my estimation, great authority and flexibility to enter into leases of parks property absent council or the mayor's even specific approval. Just as the Parks Board can enter into any contracts. There are some limitations. For instance, leases cannot extend past 50 years, but there's a degree of flexibility that the Parks Board does have that control, should that be a potential avenue down the road. That being said, I think that where we at in the process is really it's an exploration that the committee here is trying to find what is the best ongoing long-term use of this. But I just think from a basic legal perspective, if there's going to be a sale of the land, there's clearly a process that involves that the Parks Board makes a recommendation as to what the ongoing needs are of the Parks Department, whether this fits into it, and then it goes to the mayor's office, and then it comes to the Common Council, who is the ultimate determiner of whether or not to sell parks property. But as for leases with third parties, up to 50 years, which is the maximum that a Parks Department can enter into a lease, there's really quite a bit of flexibility and authority granted under the statute for the Parks Department to make such decision for parks land. Are there any clarifying questions that I can...
I just want to make sure I fully understood what you just shared. In terms of a lease agreement, the Park Board can make that decision without going to the mayor.
Correct.
Okay, but if any park land, if it were to be sold, then that process would be that the Park Board would make a recommendation.
That's the sole power that the Parks Board has, is just to make a recommendation.
Then it goes to the mayor, and then the mayor would send a resolution to the Common Council to approve.
Correct.
Okay.
The mayor cannot single-handedly go and sell parks property without council approval.
Okay. What would happen if the council does not approve the resolution?
Doesn't sell.
Doesn't sell. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's really sort of a checks and balance of power that you can't just
do
arbitrarily go and do things without the full, or at least the majority support of the community and the elected officials.
And lease-wise, there are some triggers in place or not? I mean, in terms of involving the mayor. You had mentioned 50 years or under 50 years. I mean, is there a threshold there, or is it terms in terms of value? I mean, or what? Where?
So
when we're looking at leases, it sounds as if there's a different process.
So, I mean, the very first bullet under the statute, under 3610-311, says the board may, number one, enter into contracts and leases for facilities and services. Period. So, and then it lists a variety of other different powers that the Parks Board has. Then it speaks to Part B, where it talks about the board may also lease any buildings or grounds belonging to the unit being the city Parks Department, located within a park to a person for a period not to exceed 50 years. Further in the statute, there's reference to a $25,000 threshold, and if I can dig through my notes here quickly, I can, if the yearly lease rate is under $25,000, then it does not need the mayor or common council's approval. And, lawyers can get creative, and so that, a typical structure and what's been done in the past, use of ground leases, things like that, where the Parks Department and the city get the benefit of any improvements made on the lease, and that, so it's not necessarily done in a dollar value.
I have one more. One of the questions when we first started the process of having the meetings was when Elbel Park was given to the city, were there any conditions, to the city in terms of maintaining the park, or what were the expectations? Do we have any paperwork?
The original conveyance to the city?
Yes,
I have not seen that paperwork, and I am not aware of any deed restrictions, but that would need to have a second, another review just to confirm.
It was actually purchased by the city for the purpose of being a golf course. When it was originally purchased.
Okay. You know how much we paid for it?
It's in the folder. I can't remember.
it's there.
I'll go back and look.
Yeah, that was. Feels like that was February.
Okay.
Yeah, that actually is in there. And just to go back through, that was what statute we're currently operating under. There was the confusion, or possibly still is, I don't know, but that was a question that was brought to us through the public. So thanks for addressing that. Frankly, it's new information to me, the 25,000 and the 50-year thing. So
I think that some of the confusion, there's just processes as the statute goes, and Kathy's probably had to deal with this numerous times, but Parks Board is unique in that it has its own set of governing statutes. And sometimes when you commingle, the process for public works, the process for other city agencies to dispose of property, it's easy to confuse the statute instead of, because it's not necessarily your first thing, parks, why would parks have their own statutory body? But they do, and there's a process that's outlined there as to how to dispose of that property.
And I guess just follow up, there are other parks or other cities, municipalities that operate under different statutes, right, within the state of Indiana. And that was a question that I think we did ask Kathy to address.
Number one, I want to commend the committee for the yeoman work. I went through the 3 meetings that you posted, and there's a lot of information in the listing of everything that's in Dropbox. I think that's very commendable that we have one source to have access to all of that. When Councilmember Broden asked for information, I put together, and I have some limited copies if the public would like any.
Mike, we're going to get back to use with you. There were a couple questions related to that. If you don't mind.
What, Mike first?
Yeah, or ownership.
I'll speak whenever.
Okay. Do you want to? Is that okay? Maybe
That's fine.
before we go on.
Go right ahead.
I'm sorry, I lost track of that. I didn't.
Go right ahead. Because the Mud Lake issue also, I think we're going to ask about. Michelle, let me get one.
I think the biggest question that has arisen was, who owns the lake?
Right.
Do we have any additional insights on that, or Larry, if there's anything you might want to add?
The lake is, as Kathy could also speak to, water law is kind of funny. But The lake in itself is a public body of water. Where the ownership comes into it is really how you access the lake in and of itself. And so, to the extent that city property or parks property, and sometimes I'll interchange the words, but if there's an access point, a public access point for the lake, then you can get on the lake. That does not give you the right to just get out of the lake onto anybody's private property. You know, you can swim, you could kayak, you know, there's a variety of things you can do on that body of lake where the water itself is public. But you have to have a public access point to get there. You know, there's a variety of ways to work this out should, you know, the council eventually decide that it's going to sell the land or eventually move forward with some sort of a lease arrangement by the Parks Board to maintain access to that lake for the public. But to the extent that there is private all the way around that lake, then while the water is still public, there's no ability for the public to access that public body of water. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, if you could picture the way the lake sits, the north end of the lake, which abuts private property, and then there's sort of the west and the south and sort of curving around, which would be part of the public. And so there'd be a variety of different means for the public to access it in its current state. But just because it's a public lake does not give you the right to go and trespass on a private property that abuts up there.
So the recreational uses hinges on access and public access. What is that? Putting your own kayak in, or I mean, what is access defined as? Public access. I mean, what does that look like? And are we at that point already? And it's just a matter of exercising.
You know, I guess having never played golf out at Elbel or been out to Mud Lake, I mean, to the extent that there's any means of getting into the lake from public property, that's your access point.
Okay.
Similarly to like a boat launch, you know, that if that's a public means that, you know, you can get onto any body of water that way, but you would not be able to traverse over somebody's backyard and go drop your kayak or canoe in there without some sort of a pre-existing easement, which I don't know whether or not such things exist, and typically landowners try to prevent those from existing.
So if we see any, as we do our ecological studies and see any, you know, invasive species in the water or something like that, whose responsibility is it to maintain the public water there?
I mean, I think that I don't want to speak too much out of turn.
Jurisdiction oversees that, the DNR, or we don't know that yet?
I mean, DNR would tell you most likely. I mean, again, I don't want to speak for them. They would tell you that they have the ability to regulate the waterway. That doesn't mean that they would take the responsibility of treating invasive species. You know, I think that to the extent that the city wanted to go in there and treat invasive species, I would probably recommend that it do the old-fashioned, provide notice to all of the affected parties, and, you know, sort of walk delicately, because, again, as Kathy can speak to, water rights are fun under the law.
They're fluid. Last question related to that. Have we affirmed, or is this yet to be determined, that the private properties that abut the lake, is there any other public access associated, you know, is there any break in that?
From my review of the area maps, there have been no easements granted for the public's benefit off of private property.
Okay.
Is that where you're?
Yes, thank you. Very well stated. Thanks.
Adam,
All right.
On the issue of the sale, did the city portion off what used to be the nursery and sell that part of Elbel Park?
I do not believe that has been sold. I believe that there's been some preliminary process to try to protect that tree farm and to exclude it from any potential sale. But I don't know if the final area plan and parcel has been signed off on and approved and all that. I think everything's sort of gone to a holding point.
Okay. Based on what you said, the process would require ultimately a resolution coming to the council if it were to be sold.
If the tree farm?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because again, it's city property. Yeah, but if they were just to subdivide, thank you, Aaron, that parcel off, it's not exchanging hands. It's just becoming a separate,
Recorded different.
deedable.
And what, I think, Larry, could you address that maybe in terms of the subdivision process? Because I think that was in not a holding pattern, but...
I think they were waiting for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larry Maliazzi, Executive Director of the Plan Commission. We do have a plat on file that's been submitted by the city of South Bend to plat off the tree farm, I guess what we call it. But that's on hold because there's just, in a subdivision process plat, it's not really a subjective review, it's a very objective review. You meet all the conditions, you get platted. There are certain items on the plat itself, just technical things that need to be resolved. And those haven't been resolved yet. And we just heard, last month or more that the city just requested us that you just be put on hold and not going to respond to those items of nonconformance until they're ready. So as far as we're concerned, it just sits in our drawers and waits for action from the city and or the city's professional representative.
So the survey has been done and it's all platted, but it's just making it official, or
Well,
an okay?
it's not
What's the
platted, it's
process?
just not official. Nothing's official yet.
No, no.
It's just technically still in review.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. So it's in limbo, so to speak. So once the city decides to move forward, they correct whatever needs to be done on the plat, and then whoever's on the plat as far as the ownership, they sign the plat.
Okay.
Okay, and usually it's a person with the Parks Department or the Board of Public Works, whoever the city and or Parks Department determines has the authority to sign that kind of document. So, once the surveyor gives us all that information, it gets recorded and then becomes an official lot.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Sure.
View of that. All right, thank you, Mike. Kathy, would you?
Sure.
Thanks.
When Councilmember Broden asked for some additional information, she and Councilmember Vorty also asked for a comparison of the state laws that are involved, because going through the sheet, I want to highlight just a couple items. Second-class cities in the state of Indiana have the option to operate under two separate chapters of the Title 36 of the Indiana Code. Back in 1982, there was a mandate from the Indiana General Assembly that you had to pass ordinances at the second-class level to establish all of your various departments, bureaus, and divisions by a certain date. I don't remember if Councilmember Vorty was on the council back then, 82. So John would have voted on this. And this was a very lengthy, it was legal size, 13-page, and if you look at the title of the section that specifically incorporated what state law the city of South Bend would operate under, it just says adoption of applicable statute. It didn't even say the park department. And so the city then elected since 82 to operate under this particular chapter of the state law. Again, Councilmember Broden asked for, okay, let's see where some of the other second-class cities are. And this is not comprehensive of all the second-class cities in Indiana. There's about 21. But we were able to be in contact with 18 of them. And you can see the cities, 12 of the 18 are opting under Chapter 3, and then there are 6, with South Bend being one of them that have opted for Chapter 4. So I did just a very small comparison of some of the governing law, because one of the common themes that came through the 3 meetings that you've had already, is are there additional, or can we be more creative with regard to getting more input from the public? And when you look at how the boards are established and what their duties are, there is a difference on what option you have. The municipal board, like our sister city of Mishawaka, they have 4 members that are appointed by the mayor. They have to have an interest in or knowledge about parks and recreation. The same criteria that only 2 members of the board can be of one political party, just like ours. However, they can also have outreach with regard to the school corporation because of the joint uses for track, for golf, for things like this, and then also the library. So you can see those comparisons right from the get-go. There is a difference between what state law you are opting on. The second-class city common councils have the opportunity, because when you opt, you have to do it by ordinance. You have to do it through a public venue. And there's not a penalty to change at some point in time. If you flip it over then, the other item, again, going to public input, specifically under what Elkhart and Mishawaka are closest cities to us, they also have the authority to create advisory councils that work in keeping with the actual municipal board itself, and they can also have special committees. They would be assigned specific topics. They can be respectful to certain groups or associations that have expertise in certain areas and assign those topics. And they can also sit with the board and have discussions and debates. However, they do not have the opportunity to vote. So again, that's a significant difference to the state law that South Bend is operating under. Some of the municipal powers given to both boards, I've just done a little bit of it as far as the differences involved. The one for the Mishawaka-Elkhart situation is that there are specific recommendations and annual reports that go both to the mayor and to the common council each year that are mandated. A similar opportunity for such sharing of information is not required under state law for South Bend. The section of the state law that, and this is where, again, attorneys can be creative, but we also may have the opportunity to disagree. The section about the 50-year lease and is also my reading of the law, and again, you know, Michael is the park board attorney and also the Board of Public Works attorney. I'm the legislative attorney for the Common Council. So I'm not as expertise in this area as he is, but my reading of the law is that that particular law applies if the city of South Bend would have opted under Chapter 3, not Chapter 4. However, it is very specific with regard to sale, that it is an ordinance, my reading of the law, that would be required if there is any sale of park property, and probably the best example of that, and I know Karen was on the Common Council when property was sold for the Adams High School extension, when they were doing their major remodeling over there, and that went through a process through the City Council. So there are just, you know, as a brainstorming session, there are significant differences depending on what the city elects to operate under. And the one that may be a safety net for everybody, and again, this is more what Michael could probably address in much greater detail, but there is a provision of Title 36, which I referenced right at the very bottom. And the agent of the city who deals with the disposition of property, my understanding is the Board of Public Works, and therefore they have the authority to dispose of property pursuant to this particular chapter. However, if certain thresholds are met with regard to more than $50,000 of a sale, and if a lease has more than $25,000 of value in a particular calendar year, then my reading of the law is that not only is the Board of Public Works involved, but also the legislative body, the Common Council, would be involved in both of those instances. Regardless of whether you're operating under Chapter 3, the Mishawaka, the Elkharts, or South Bend. I see that as being all-encompassing for any park or recreation. Now, Michael may totally disagree with me, but, I think, if anything, I think, and the one thing that I noticed in your minutes is that I did not see Councilmember Kelly as chair of the council's Parks and Recreation Committee. If we are going to look further down the road to get what is the best thing for the city of South Bend, you can continue to do all of the yeoman work that you've already been doing, but if it makes some sense to also look at, are we operating under the best possible state law, and perhaps change our local ordinance, that perhaps could be a task that Councilmember Kelly's committee could be looking at the same time that the special committee is looking at the Elbel situation. So I just throw that out as opportunities that you may or may not want to get into.
So any takeaways, comments, thoughts, anybody?
To me, it sounds like Chapter 3 offers more protections than Chapter 4 in the public interest.
With regard to public input, yes. There are differences with regard to, you both have the authority to bond and, all of that. There are some other differences between it because the state law is very, very voluminous under both. But on the one issue that was a recurring theme throughout all of your meetings is, are there vehicles that you can look at for more public input? In my opinion, there's no doubt that it's much more vibrant with regard to Chapter 3.
So Chapter 3 puts it into the code that advisory councils and special committees can be formed. Chapter 4 doesn't address it, but it doesn't preclude that from happening.
No, but it sets forth a mechanism that is very clear under the state law that the board, the council, the mayor would not have an option to say no to those. That once the board decides that yes, it is feasible that we have this problem, we need these experts, that they can run with it, and they would have a viable role under state law.
It seems, I don't want to jump in
Can I
if
ask
anyone else's question.
one more question? Prior to 1982, park commissioners named the park superintendent.
Correct.
And after 82, it became the mayor's appointment, just as any other department head.
Correct.
Does Chapter 3 provide for the mayor making the appointment or the park commission?
And again, I didn't get into the weeds with regard to the appointment of a park, but that it is statutorily set forth, and that could be something, again, if there's some interest in learning more about the differences or the similarities of the two state laws, but there are some differences.
So we can't just, as a council, we can't arbitrarily say, I think we ought to increase the size of the park commission, because that's specified in state law.
That's state law.
Numbers and composition.
Correct.
That's what I wanted to do in the
Under both. Under both. You have very little flexibility, if any, with regard to how those boards are constituted.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other? Just a question, though, going forward, though, if we're looking at sell, that's pretty clear. Lease, there sounds like there's some question yet on
That, I don't think that issue, based on what Michael has said, and my reading of the law has not been
going
resolved.
forward would be required.
I would argue that
We've got time.
that the statute 3610-3 applies to all municipalities, and 3610-4 that the city adopted also applies, that you have to read them together.
That's what I was wondering too, as I was seeing, kind of how it wasn't repeated over here. Some things that you would think would be in the stronger statute weren't repeated, and I wondered if it was supposed to encompass
And again, we get along quite well, but I would disagree with that conclusion,
Yeah.
only
I was
because
wondering the same thing.
just with regard to the members of the board, the members of our board can only be removed for cause. The members of the Mishawaka or the Elkhart examples, the cause is very specific with regard to what it is. There are so many differences between, some of the policies and procedures that I don't think you can encompass them all. I think you have that option, one or the other.
Right.
That's my,
And obviously,
and I
I'm just looking at the limited
unfortunately
portion
did
of
not
the statute,
find any
yeah.
case authority on this or Attorney General's opinions, but that's something that I'm continuing to pursue.
I guess the question I want to get at, in terms of, going forward, if we're really looking at all types of options, sell, lease, being a pretty significant one, there should be some clarity, because I'm hearing that there's not clarity on the lease.
I think there's agreement on the sale, but it's the lease that I think is
On the lease, I mean, if you're...
And it doesn't have to be decided tonight, because we're not deciding. But I'm just saying, as I think
there's
as a...
still protections to the Parks Board under 3610-4 as far as leasing park property.
Okay.
In particular, 3610-49, which I believe Kathy
right,
highlighted.
that I've cited, correct.
That, there's flexibility for the Parks Board to enter into lease agreements.
And 1049, that same statute, does not carve out a role at all for the city council.
So, and nor does 3610-3 does not have a
Correct.
role with leasing parks property.
The selling.
But consistently across the board, you're going to find that the city does not, and again, I think it goes back from an overarching policy discussion that it's a check to the powers of the legislative governing body of the city that you cannot sell land without council approval.
Sounds very reasonable to me.
But it's de minimis values.
It does, but I'm seeing here, so what am I missing? Lease or sell any building ground or grounds, any buildings, grounds under the control of the department. And that's in 4.9.
You're looking at Section 8 there, under 3610-4.
10.49, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's pretty...
However, you have to, again, read it in conjunction with 3610-418, which spells out line and verse that if it is a sale, it's the council via ordinance.
Okay. Thank you both for these insights, and I think
We have muddied the waters.
Well, you've
Mud
muddied-
Lake is very relevant here.
Yeah, fitting for Elbel.
I think that just the takeaway is that everybody's going to be on the same page with what the process is, should there be a sale.
Sure.
And if the ultimate decision is a lease,
We have time to work that out.
Yeah, exactly. That was my takeaway. Great, thanks. Next item on our agenda, Aaron, if you might be willing to give us an update from TJ Mann's behalf.
Apologize, TJ wasn't on TJ's behalf for not being able to be here, but he's been putting in some long hours on the course. He had some time off to be with his kids, but he's been quite busy. The course, oh, look at this. As everyone is aware, it opened up even earlier than we thought it was going to be able to due to some nice weather. Of course, it snowed this past weekend, so what are you going to do? April 4th and 5th, we closed the course for 2 days to do the deep tine aerification process to all the greens. And so that was a really important process, and some top dressing and overseeding on the greens. I'm not an agronomist, but from what I understand, this is treating the course with utmost care, more than it has been in recent years. Working on the drainage and healthy growth of the green, in particular, Green 15, which has been closed, and it will remain closed for another couple weeks. We're told to be open by May 1st at the absolute latest. So we thank everybody for their patience.
can you pull the mic over, Aaron?
Oh, you can't hear me? Sorry. I apologize. We're told that the one green that's been closed will be reopened no later than May 1st. We're hopeful that it's just right around the corner here. We appreciate, and I know TJ and his staff does, everyone's patience while we're getting that thing back into repair. Again, the council was generous enough to help allocate the funding to bring that some of those projects back up to snuff, but that does require some closings, and appreciate the patience. We want to do a grand reopening once everything's really back to where we're real proud of it. So that's scheduled tentatively for April 29th. It's a Friday evening, and so we'll do some food and beverage event out there in the clubhouse and do some fun specials on the course. So looking forward to that. We're also, in terms of operations, trying to streamline some things in the clubhouse just to make the experience more enjoyable for guests, as well as the operations more efficient. So we're combining. You'll see some construction going on there right now, combining the pro shop operation with the kind of golf registration where you pay your green fees, combining the two counters. So that'll be done pretty quick here as well. So that whole remodel of the clubhouse is going to be a nice value add. Working on the tee boxes, reshaping everything, deep tying all of that, working on some things I don't quite understand the scientific nature of loosening the soil for play, but some of these exercises will help really reduce the maintenance, the day-to-day maintenance. It'll help with drainage. It'll help reduce some of the chemical usage and things of that nature. So two things. It's going to make a better kind of all of these exercises that TJ's mentioning here in his report, and we'll make sure we put this in the Dropbox if folks want to read it a little more closely. We're done with the spirit of making a better course, better experience for folks, but also making sure we're being as cost efficient as possible with our maintenance and operations. Some more of the fun stuff that's happening. The movie night I promised last time is now scheduled. We got a whole movie series funded.
Great choice.
Happy Gilmore will be playing Friday night, June 24th. So hope that folks will come out and enjoy that. We'll be free to the public, but we will be selling, of course, beer and hot dogs and all kinds of concessions out there. So it'll be a fun thing to try, and I hope people respond well to that. TJ's planning on night golf as well, so I know people have asked about that, and we'll try that out. Not at Elbel, but he's working on disc golf at Studebaker, so that's kind of neat. He's pleased to report, I've said this a couple times, any publicity isn't bad publicity, so we've really been trying to leverage the idea that Elbel's been in the news a lot to say we're open for business, and we've got more outings scheduled there than we have had in recent years. 14 are currently scheduled in terms of outings. And we've reallocated some advertising budgets throughout the Parks Department to make sure that the course is getting its a fair share of marketing. So we've got some partnerships with WNDU and some Groupon type activities. You see us pretty active on social media as well. So that's kind of, again, I hope I did that a little bit of justice on behalf of TJ. I'm not a golf expert. I'm learning like you, Karen. But I got to put the full report in the Dropbox, and hopefully people that are out there are experiencing some improved experiences. So, yeah.
Thank you. Sizable jump in advertising money.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, draft recommendations and preliminary discussion on that, and then what we'll do is follow up with public input questions. So maybe we'll just go at this in terms of all the committee members had received this information, and maybe we'll just go through the ones that were on our brought up at previous meetings. So recommendation 1, engage a golf course management consulting firm. Does the audience, do members of the audience have this actual piece of paper or not? Or is it just the AV? Okay, sorry. So engage a golf course management consulting firm for all 3 courses to assess. Aaron, do you want to address any of that, or any background on why we felt that was an important recommendation?
Sure. Elbel is a part of an ecosystem of the parks, but also of the golf division in particular. And so if we're spending some time looking at Elbel's operations, I think it's prudent to look at all three courses in harmony and look at how they can work together efficiently and what kind of economies of scale can be realized. So the largest cost of any golf course really is the greens and turf management. So engaging a firm to help us with that. And looking at a capital improvement plan that really spells things out over the next 5 to 10 years. But then the consulting part comes in with on the management side of things when we look at our the position within the marketplace, our rates, best practices, marketing strategies, look at the complementary use and see what's feasible and how we might be able to glean some extra revenues from that, or what should be free and wouldn't interfere with golf. Engaging the users is going to be very important throughout this entire process, as well as talking to the local golf community. So that was the first recommendation there.
Okay, and then recommendation 2, that was something you brought forth as well, that as an outcome of earlier discussion. So do you want to address that as well?
Yeah, I think it's important, whether we continue to operate this in-house, lease it, sell it, anything that comes, we need to understand what we're dealing with. We've heard from many experts, some of them in this room today, about the special features that are present out at Mud Lake. And so getting a full inventory of the flora and fauna, understanding the water quality, understanding how our care of the course and the property impacts the natural environment out there. So I think that's important that we catalog that and have a process for the way we care for and maintain the property. And when we zoom out from Elbel, I also committed that we'll be looking at a natural resource management plan over the next year for all of our major parks.
Now you actually, and I don't think we captured this from earlier conversations, but you had specified by June 2017 for that natural resource management plan. Do you want that included in that as part of this recommendation? We can address that as we go. And the other was the element of cross-department collaboration, bringing in offices and departments within the city as a whole, and also to acknowledge that this was a move from kind of a voluntary and to a consultant.
Yeah.
I mean, you've made that change.
Sure. It'll be important to engage volunteers, but if we're looking at for our accreditation, for the parks accreditation process, and to look at any type of potential funding, we really need to make sure we have experts in play as we're developing the natural resource management plan. So we will have to spend some resources to make that a reality, certainly. But want to engage volunteers and the public in the process. It's really important as we go through. And so got some preliminary conversations with Orbis Environmental Consulting, who is being creative about how we can engage volunteers and the public in that process.
Include deadlines, June 2017, and then the cross-department collaboration?
Yeah, the cross-department collaboration is important. I mean, we have the Office of Sustainability here, which will be a great resource, and the Department of Community Investment and what they're doing with the streetscapes and things of that nature. So that will certainly be a part of it. If we want to include it, I'd be amenable to that. The date of June 17th is a pretty firm deadline for us because that's when our reaccreditation is due. So
that's pretty.
So we will.
It would be advisable.
Yeah. And I think the deadline to have, we wanted 15, 16 months to be able to do that. You need kind of a growing season to do the environmental consulting, which is why we've kind of tried to expedite that to some degree. We're here in the early part of the growing season, and again, not an expert here, but there's some things that only grow this time of the year. So if we want to get a good inventory of those things and understand how they fit into the ecology of the entire park, we need to start that sooner than later. So that's why we've been in conversations with Orbis already.
Recommendation 3, does anybody want to address that? Or I think everyone had that's been something that's really percolated up, I think, from all of us. The existing work product of the Special Advisory Committee on Elbel, the ongoing engagement of local experts. We may want to insert city departments, the cross-collaboration thought there maybe. Key stakeholders and the public must be integral, embedded into the contractual terms of any city-hired consultants. Just on that, the idea is being very intentional. Great to have the consultants, but not lose the energy, I think was part of the considerations, not lose the energy that individuals who've come forward who have expertise and have done that on a voluntary basis, whether it was related to the golf or to, some of the environmental, ecological issues, night sky issues. I mean, we've really been blessed, thankfully, with a lot of pro bono expertise throughout this whole process. So we wanted to be, really to state that. So that was in discussions, something that's come forward, and just trying to articulate that there. And we can see, as we go forward and get input tonight, add, subtract, keep, whatever. Recommendation 4. Park Department and Park Board, in conjunction with public input, update the City of South Bend 5-year master park plan, and then consider formation of advisory or standing committees. Anybody like to address that as an item?
I think it's important. I think it goes back to what we've heard, but also members of the advisory committee as well. The need to ensure and to really clearly define how the public input can be received, but also be part of the planning process. And we've just put out here for consideration a formation of advisory or standing committees. As you look at the work that is before the Park Department, the Park Board, and also the city at large, standing committees can really assist with gathering information. Of course, the Park Board will have the sole responsibility for, gathering all the information. But you want to encourage and to maintain the level of interest, but also the level of support, not only for Elbel, but for all the parks that we'll be looking at during this process.
Dan, as a member of the Park Board, I think you've expressed the idea of having that additional insight and sounding board. Back to you. I don't know if you have any comments.
No, absolutely. That's one of the things that came up in our last meeting here that I was very excited about, which was getting that input from the public. So I'm a big believer in having some of these standing committees around the different events and programs that the Parks Board or that the parks runs, and having that input come to us, so we're hearing the voice and making decisions based on that voice. So, absolutely.
Recommendation 5, Aaron, do you want to address that one? Because we had some good conversations on that. Would that be fair?
Yes, so we're going to, as we've already committed, that we'll manage and maintain the golf course throughout 2016, and that we'll budget for Elbel the same for 2017. Now this, I want to make sure that the second part's really important to me. Future use decision is deferred this time, as we've been talking about. We're not talking about sale or lease or management contract, or it's open half the year or not open half of the year, or it's consolidated management with Erskine and Studebaker. We're not making any of those decisions today, but we're going to budget for what I would consider probably the most costly scenario for 2017 that would allow us to explore any of those options in the future. So there won't be a scenario where you would see us put nothing. In other words, there won't be a scenario where you'd see us put nothing in the line item for Elbel, where we'd find ourselves in a situation that money wasn't being spent or maintained. Just want to commit back to the public that we will have resources dedicated to Elbel in one way, shape, or form or another. That was a little long-winded, but that makes sense.
I think it's great.
Absolutely.
Aaron, one question. Go ahead. One question I have is, when is the FY 2017 budget set? Oh, is that your question?
I was going to have these two address that possibly, because you and I have not been part of that process.
The budget process will begin. I think that the administration is planning on having a budget kickoff Part of that would be the administration presentation in regards to the current funding sources and anticipated revenues. And if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be sometime in April or May. Prior to that time, the council members will be asked to identify some of their goals and objectives that they would like to see to be part of the upcoming budget. The actual budget hearings will begin more than likely during the months of July and August. And our attorney can share with you when those budgets would have to be approved and the process that we would have to adhere to. I think it's important as we do move forward that we do identify funds in the budget so we won't be in the position that we're in coming back asking for additional appropriations. At least it's there. The council cannot increase the budget. We do not have that authority, but we can reduce the budget. And so it's best to have it in there as we move forward. And again, a number of decisions would have to be made prior to that time. But the real budget process in regards to receiving information from the administration, department heads, will more than likely begin in July.
And the ultimate state law deadline is prior to November 1st for the actual passage of the tax rate and everything else in the budget.
And those meetings are all public?
All
It's
public.
Each departmental head?
And then last year, we had a total of 3 budget hearings within the community. They were well attended, and more than likely, we would have additional meetings in the public at various sites. And again, we haven't worked out the timeline, but all that information will be posted on the website. Last year, I believe we did an excellent job in responding to the public. There were a number of questions in which the public had posed during the budget process, and all of those questions were addressed and placed on the website. So anyone who would like to just maybe have a brief overview of the budget process and the questions and the processes that we went through last year, all of that information should be still on the website.
And your committee met 18 times?
18 times.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure that we do allocate funds, but we'll base any future decisions off of a lot of the recommendations that we discussed previously.
All right. Let's see. Recommendation 6 is, I just put in parentheses there for everyone's behalf, the oversight issue, because there's a couple options here. Going forward, Karen mentioned our time frame as directed by the resolution that was passed expires on what, the 14th? Or no, I'm sorry, what's the expiration date?
It's 45 days from your first
I think
meeting.
it's like the
Which was,
15th. I think it's the 15th. I think it coincides with taxes for some reason. Anyway, so a couple of thoughts here. The Park Board and the South Bend Common Council could adopt parallel resolutions extending the oversight of this committee, so the Special Advisory Committee on Elbel, I should say, through fiscal year 2016, or, some other option there in terms of timeline. Could be done by quarterly or whatever. Or we could disband the committee and then just put it in that there be progress reports, updates that are integrated into the public meeting agendas at both the Park Board and the Common Council's Parks, Arts, Recreation, and Culture Committee. And those are existing boards and committees of our respective areas. So then the last would be a hybrid of the above. So something that might meld those two options. So that's thoughts or recommendations or ideas there. Anybody want to comment or suggestions, thoughts, and just preliminary comment?
Yeah, my thought would be number 2 works for us, because I like the addition of the advisory and standing committees to the Parks Board.
Oh, number 2 in this, you're saying.
I'm sorry, yeah, number
Numbers
2
2
and 2 on this.
Second bullet point.
Second bullet point, yeah, thank you. Because it allows us to use our existing meeting time to do that. It also enables us to take the feedback from some of these advisory standing committees we're getting on the programs that we have in the parks to be integrated into an existing structure. And we always have an opportunity, I know at least at the parks board meetings, for those concerned citizens to come and talk. So that would be my thought.
Okay.
I think to actually just build on Dan's comments, similarly, I think, and you and I talked earlier, and my fear is that what we're becoming now is becoming redundant to what the park board is charged with doing, and my park committee as well, and that the check and balance is there. That this committee has been very, very useful in terms of allowing for public input, in terms of making some, what I think are really solid recommendations. And again, as I said almost 45 days ago, 45 days doesn't mean this process ends. It means we make some recommendations that then the park board, the park committee, the council can act on in ways that are appropriate. My concern, again, is appearing that we're stepping on the toes of those entities already in place to do the things that we're now looking at. We're becoming more of an oversight entity as opposed to an advisory one, as we kind of get into the weeds in some of these things. So I would agree that if it were up to me, I'd be interested in pursuing the second goal.
For me, I think it would be very clear. For me, I would need to have a level of confidence and clarity when we talk about progress reports and updates. What are we looking for? And they would need to be clearly identified, and that we would need to have adequate time to really receive the reports. And if you look at our committee structure at the council level, our time is very short in regards to when we go through those bills of ordinance that are before us. And so that may mean that for Randy, when we look at receiving reports from the status and the positions of the recommendations, for example, what would they look like when you come before the two bodies, and how much time would be allotted, but most importantly, the time for public to give input. So that may entail having a separate meeting of these two bodies, because if you add it on, you have to make sure that there's adequate time to give the reports, but also to receive feedback as well.
I can appreciate that, Karen. I know the meetings get jam-packed, and luckily there's 3 meetings a month that would be available. So the 2 council committee meetings and the 1 park board meeting. Park board meets monthly. So between the 3 meetings on a monthly basis, I hope we could find some portion of the agenda that could be dedicated to that. And one that would be robust enough to satisfy everyone's needs. I think some of it, for me, comes down to logistics, too. You're going to get in the budget process, so you had your 18 meetings.
I was thinking the same thing when she said 18.
We're going to start a public engagement process with regards to the natural resource management plan, a public engagement process with regards to the golf management consulting, a public process for the Riverwalk planning. And so at some point in time, it just comes down to logistics, being conscious of everyone's and the public's.
As long as it happens and is very strategically planned, and that the public, but also that we, as council members, that we would have the information, so that, we spend a lot of time gathering information and really putting together what I believe is an excellent beginning for further discussion. But again, we have to make sure it happens. It can't get lost in the other work that we do.
And to your point, Karen, I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm comfortable, having known Aaron for a long time now and worked with him. I'm absolutely comfortable with the way in which I know he'll approach this with regard certainly to public input. And I think, the same with regard to the board, knowing several other people on that board. I mean, being relatively, how many new members? Are there two?
Amy and I are new.
So, it's 50% new right now also, and I happen to know those folks pretty well also. And I, again, perfectly comfortable with knowing that they'll be fully transparent and accommodating with regard to public input. So again, I want to be, I want it to look as though, for me personally anyway, that allowing people to do the jobs that they were asked to do, and certainly with regard to these recommendations that we've set.
I'm going to speak to the park board and just extension, or hybrid. And from the standpoint of similar finishing a job, looking at the resolution and in some way feeling like because there has been so much need for fact-finding, and then we're engaging consultants to give us more information, and at some point I would, the outcome of all of this consultation and public process and all the work that has gone heretofore, I think there'll be options there, or there will be options that will have to be decided upon. And I guess one of my, looking forward, if these are all marching along, the consultants are doing their work on the management side of the course itself, the ecological assessments are happening. I guess I want to have a good and robust discussion that relies on the expertise that we have heard heretofore, and that things do not get lost, and that because there's been just, there's been terrific input, there's been a lot of questions, and I guess that would be, what could that look like? Maybe as little as 2 more meetings. That, that would be more in third quarter, probably, I think just based on some of the earlier information, late summer, early fall. But it allows the folks who have been tracking this issue and the work that we have done that has really incorporated the public, generally speaking, but then has brought the experts within that public who have, special area of interest and expertise. I don't know. I just think that there's some value to finishing the task and not making it a redundant or burdensome process or something that fills our calendars, because we all know we're all busy, but just the faithfulness to the process, that there was a reason we took this on, and felt, collectively that collaboration would bring about something substantial, and something that the public could buy into. So to
help me understand your point,
thanks.
How would that differ from it coming through exactly what you're talking about? Because I absolutely agree completely. But coming through our park committee, for example.
I just think that there's a recommendation from the members who are at this committee. It wouldn't change. I mean, it's still advisory in nature, but it keeps the ball in front of the same players. I'll just be very frank. It keeps the same issue among the same players. We have the opportunity then to review the output from these consultants, and if we approve the recommendations, that the public and the experts will be integral to that, but we'll still have the opportunity to make a recommendation of the options that are there, and then that is advisory.
Sure.
So and then
players,
that goes back to the board.
Yeah, relative to players, I guess that's part of my concern, is that the full park board isn't here, and this is even more relevant to them. The full park committee isn't here, and perhaps even more relevant to them in terms of getting this information. And I know we've already started the consulting. Aaron's already started. We have nothing to do with it. Don't want to take credit for that. So I think it's even more important that those folks be involved. And again, not that this ends, that this was the springboard to exactly what, in my estimation, it was intended to do.
I can tell you that at least the first consulting agreement that I've got in my hands, again, I haven't signed anything, but it was important that we start to move that along, does conclude with a public meeting to report on the findings. And so similar to how we've asked that public engagement be embedded into the contractual terms, I can ensure that public reporting is embedded in there right alongside that, if that helps.
That's a great idea, yeah, that's excellent.
Is it okay, John?
Hi, Mayor. I would just like to offer a hint of support to Mr. Farrell's suggestion that a regular report be incorporated into the Park Department regular meeting agenda, the same way that City Council agendas have report from city offices. The Park Department or the Park Commission, as it meets monthly, could have an agenda item routinely that says report from advisory committee. And then I think there needs to be some specificity as to what those committees, the mission of each committee is. One might be ecological. The folks who are most interested in the flora and fauna in Elbel Park have been kind enough to recognize the vested interest of the golfers. The golfers, on the other hand, have been kind enough to recognize and value the input or the uniqueness of the property and the value of the property. But it seems as though there ought to be a committee for golf interest and a committee for ecological interest, like standing subcommittees or something, and they have an opportunity to report. Maybe it'll be no report this month, you know.
I think in that way, John, this actually then has more legs than this special advisory committee.
Well, this special advisory committee will probably just go its own way, but on an ongoing basis, you're going to have those people who are interested in taking that inventory of what's there, and that's going to take a year. The golf people, that's going to take a year at least, and you know, the good golf folks who come to all these meetings they'll have an interest in what kind of wildflowers are there, but they're really more interested in what's happening on the golf course. I am.
We've seen you golf.
You know, you see what I'm saying? Well, you get a little structure and you put it in the regular agenda as an agenda item, and you're home free, as long as the committees do their job.
If I could just add one item, regardless of what the special committee decides on recommendation number 6 and the various options, any council member could ask me to draft the resolution that extends this, and that could be on the next agenda. So just so that you know that that's out there also. That if they feel that the work that this special advisory committee has done, that it should continue.
And I could ask you to draft draft a bill that says we want to adopt Chapter 3 instead of Chapter 4.
You could.
I
don't know that I want to do that, but I'm just saying.
I think what we're saying is the most important part of the discussion is that the communication must continue, input, that we don't want to lose the hard work that's been done up until this point, and that we have a structure in place that will facilitate the communication and transparency.
Completely, absolutely. Absolutely.
And, you know, if the park...
Got that word out there.
I love it, okay. And, you know, there's no saying that, you know, I don't know how many standing committees may come up. I may choose to be on one of the standing. I may choose to be on with the golfers. But that's your possibility. I don't know what the structure. But I think the structure of those standing committees, if the park department board is going to go in that direction, has to be clearly defined.
All right, any other comments related to the recommendations? Why don't we,
Digitally, this group, even though we stop meeting after 45 days, we can keep the Dropbox alive, I'm sure, right? And so all these reports and continued findings, we can make sure if that helps as well, so.
virtual?
Virtually remain alive, right?
Yes. I want to publicly thank again the clerk's office for all the work and making sure that the technology is up and running and that the information is being preserved. And I would like to say we do have another council member present, Councilwoman Regina Williams-Preston.
So how about if we move then to the next item on the agenda, and we'll take public input and questions. And we've always been of the practice in these meetings to address the items that are on the agenda, so feel free.
What do you need, name and address?
Yes, please.
Laura Futerer, 18485 Garwood Court, South Bend 46637. I'm the Conservation Chair for the South Bend Elkhart Audubon Society, and I'd like to just mention a couple of the recommendations. I realize number 2 addresses the question of ecology, but to me an assessment indicates basically identifying flora and fauna on the property, ascertaining the general ecological health of the properties. But I'm awfully disappointed that recommendation 1 doesn't more specifically ask your consulting firm to, for example, under greens and turf management, specifically say, with an eye to the ecological impact of those procedures. And I wish that it did at least suggest that the firm consider the cost and feasibility of certification by Audubon International, which would involve putting into effect sustainable practices of golf course management. I think that's more a question of golf course management than ecological assessment, but it's not clarified. And I would remind everyone that Audubon International is actually, there's no connection with National Audubon Society, of which we are a chapter.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think it's important to recognize that the Natural Resource Management Plan will include kind of what the ecological threats are, management techniques to help mitigate those and monitor and things of that nature. So that's going to be very important to us, not only at Elbel, but everywhere. Maybe we can phrase that more authoritatively.
Is there a way to incorporate those comments in terms of sustainable, whether it's the green and turf management?
Yeah.
Is there a way to incorporate that into one?
Absolutely.
Would anyone?
And with regard to the Audubon designation, I know we had a presentation from the folks at Notre Dame who achieved that. Is that something that we aspire to at Elbel? Is that worthy of putting?
I don't think that's off the table at all. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, worth putting as a recommendation, so as a final
Incorporated.
recommendation.
Yeah, some of it comes down to it all will all play together, right, with the golf management recommendations and things of that nature. There's some financial implications of investments that will have to be made in the course to be recognized. So it all plays together. So it's not off the table for sure.
I'm sorry, Regina. I was asking specifically about the Audubon designation. We had some Notre Dame folks come in and talk about what it takes to get that, and wondering if that was still something that you're considering for Elbel. And it should be more formally put as one of the recommendations.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Betts. I live at 511 South St. Joseph Street, South Bend, Indiana, 46601. I wanted to just express support for Councilwoman Broden and Councilwoman White's suggestions about the need for confidence, clarity, and perhaps even continued meeting of the Special Advisory Committee. And I can see it's not that we want to put endless meetings on your agenda in any way, shape, or form, but I think the third to fourth quarter suggestion by Councilwoman Broden was very important. With all due respect, we're here because there was a betrayal of public trust, a lack of transparency, and we were having to hold officials accountable who weren't elected, and that proved very difficult. I know we're in a different place now. I want to commend you all for the work that you've done, and again with the people on the County Council and the Park Board, but I worry a little bit about just, I think public trust, once it has been eroded, it's going to take some time to build back. And I think the Special Advisory Committee has really been a wonderful foundation to rebuild public trust. But I would suggest that I think it would continue to build the public trust to have those recommendations go into the body that has been dealing with all of this in the first place. So I would just like to support that recommendation. And the other note is just to remember again too that originally when Elbel for Everyone formed, our original requests were ecological integrity and public access. I know we've gone back into the discussion about lease and sale this evening, and I understand why all options must be considered, but I would just like to remind the Special Advisory Committee that parks aren't necessarily about making money. That's not what parks are for. They are for the common good. They're for the good of our city. And so I hope we won't reduce this to a numbers game, but we'll keep that greater sight of what a park really does as we go forward. Thank you.
Is there room to capture that in 5? Those two access.
What's your name and address?
I'm just waiting for everybody to finish taking notes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
My name is Chris Cobb. I live at 215 East Pokagon Street, South Bend. And I have two thoughts that I'd like to share. One speaks also to the matter of the structure of recommendation number 6 and how oversight is going to be continued. It seems that for the progress report update option to function well, it depends greatly on what kind of advisory standing committee structures are put into place. So I find it just a little bit unsettling that we would move away from special advisory committee structure prior to the formation of more permanent advisory or standing committees, and with merely a recommendation that the formation of such committees be considered. Now, I hear from the discussion that that's a recommendation that it sounds like Park Board is inclined to act upon, but nevertheless, there's a gap in the process in which there's kind of a leap to get from an advisory committee being in place to a period where there is nothing in place in the creation of new structures. And it does seem to me that it would facilitate that transition for this advisory committee to continue to function until such time as a permanent rather than ad hoc set of advisory structures are established. So I would ask that committee consider that point in these recommendations. Second, this is on the borderline of what's on or not on the agenda, but I'm very conscious that nothing in the recommendations at this point or in the conversations that this committee has had has engaged very, very deeply with the matter of the educational value of Elbel. And so I'm concerned that that value not be lost in the process. And as an educator, I take some personal responsibility for not doing more to bring that idea forward. And educators being very busy people, also hard to manage to get people out in the evenings. But I do have concerns about that. I think there is extraordinary value, potential value in Elbel for education that has not yet really been surfaced in this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good to see you all again. Catherine Osborne, 517 River Avenue, South Bend, Indiana, 46601. Since this is the last meeting as constituted right now, I just want to echo thanks for everything everybody has done. I know it's been a really, really busy 45-day period, so once again, appreciate it. And I also want to echo what Chris and Jen have already said in terms of how not to lose focus at this point. And this is not out of a lack of trust of either Aaron or the two new Parks Board members that you were talking about, Randy, but it is, we've had very clear testimony in a number of venues at this point that this process was not driven by the Parks Board. It was driven by community investment, and the Parks Board was asked to vote on this resolution at the absolute last second with very little input. I mean, we've been over all of this a million times, and it's not so much that I want to re-legislate, I don't know. I don't want to go over it in enormous detail again. But just to remember that we are talking about, if we're talking about disbanding the Special Advisory Committee now, then we're talking about sending this extremely sensitive matter back into a process that didn't serve it so well the first time around. And I think, without wanting to overload anybody's agenda with meetings, it seems like having an unofficial but sort of morally weighty recommendation from the Special Advisory Committee at the end of the summer or into the fall, once data has been gathered, would be something that would really give whatever recommendation it is real weight and trust from members of the public that have been paying a lot of attention to this so far. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry Miskoski, 1113 North Elliott, South Bend, 46628. First, quick question. Aaron, will that document that you have be available either on the Park Board website, the one you read, the report?
I'll put it on the in the Elbel Dropbox.
Okay, all right.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Just want to make sure.
It might already be there.
All right. A couple of things. First of all, as a golfer, I want to see Elbel remain a golf course in perpetuity. That's my feeling. And it is a great ecological resource beyond just being a golf course. However, I don't know if people know, back in the late 60s, early 70s and 80s, what is Mud Lake that you look out from as you walk out to the clubhouse? You actually saw water. And there was a lot of time for years where the 18th green, which dips down and it goes up, the fairway dips down and goes up, that water encroached on the 18th fairway for many years. Through the years, what happened was you saw development adjacent to and south of the golf course, and the water table went down. Now we have more of what looks like a marsh than a lake out there. So my concern is, especially if anybody here is concerned about the ecology out there or anything like that, is this tree farm. If there's a move to build housing out there, say goodbye to what's left of that lake if it's built, because it's going to go down even more, it's going to be gone. Unless, for some reason, the developer is required to have city sewage and water. But I guarantee you, if people are really interested in preserving that land, we better keep our eye on that proposal to sell that property that is now the tree farm, because that could have a detrimental impact on the ecology out there more than anybody knows. Again, if you were around 15, 20, 30 years ago, you would know what I'm talking about. We actually had a lake out there. Now it's just weeds and things. So let's keep our eye on the ball and be aware of that. And for people who are concerned about the environment, pay attention. Thank you, all of you, for your work on this stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, with the tree farm, just so we're clear, when I think we covered this at one of the meetings, when the subdivision was on the table, and it still is on the table, it wasn't to change hands to sell it off or anything, it was actually to protect the tree farm in the case of any other action on the property. So that tree farm is protected.
Jason Menicki, Critchlow, 3822 West 4th Street. First off, thank you guys very much for all the hard work you put into this. As many have echoed, this process started in a very murky and a very unopen way, and it has become very open and very public, so we appreciate that. Many times I get up here, I speak my views, or I speak from an area of what I think. Today I'm going to tell more of a personal story. And I think sometimes with this process we focused on golf or we focused on ecology, but we forget sometimes there's people involved when we talk about selling or leasing the course. I'm the grandson of a man who worked 42 years for the park department, 25 at Erskine, another 17 over at the maintenance shed out at Howard Park, who raised a family of 8 on a city worker's salary, who went hungry sometimes, so his kids didn't, so his grandchildren didn't. So it's nice to think about the dollars and cents, but we got to remember that in a city that's hurting for quality paying jobs with good benefits, that the golf course provides this opportunity for people to support their family. It creates more jobs over at the maintenance shack over in Howard Park to allow people to support their family. So not only do I want to see the golf course stay, I want to see it stay in the city's hands. Because we saw with Blackthorn, once we lease it out, it becomes very easy to say, well, we're already not responsible for it, let's just get rid of it completely. So I hope we keep that in the back of our minds, that we're not just talking ecology, we're not just talking, golf, we're not just talking a few dollars and a few cents, we're talking people's livelihoods, we're talking some of the last few good jobs for some people to support their family. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to come forward? All right, where do we go from here?
I think it's safe to say, when I look at the draft summary recommendations, from 1 through 5, it appears that we have consensus on those, and again, probably would need to be further defined based on what we just heard, to make sure that, the concerns of the educational value, I think all of that would come out during the process, but I just wanted to ask the advisory board members, in terms of recommendation 1 through 5, do we have any difficulties with these recommendations?
I think I would probably be more intentional about adding the point with sustainable practices with regards to operations and management. I think that was a very clear piece that I have heard throughout. I like the ideas and that the Notre Dame Golf folks gave. I think it's consistent with the voices that we've heard from the Elbel for Everyone. Can add tremendously, I think, to the interest of the courses, and possibly, and I think this was rather loudly stated, that there could be cost savings related to that. So I would be inclined to add as part of the golf course management consulting mix of things, their scope is to look at sustainable practices or
sustainable course maintenance.
Yes.
That's what I phrase it as.
Okay, sustainable course maintenance.
Environmentally sustainable course maintenance.
Okay.
I would actually, too, because I think this is something that we cannot lose sight of always, and I'm just quickly looking, you can say best management, you can say, within that same recommendation, but the staff point is significant. We cannot overlook that, and particularly because we're looking across 3 courses, looking for efficiencies. I'm not certain. Well, I hope through the process, are we doing this in the best way? Are there clearly delineated job descriptions? Are there clear plans, annual, that staff works on? And I'm not certain where that is. So I think I would tend to add that, staff consideration, and I don't know how best to plug that in there, but make sure that is not an oversight. You can look for efficiencies, but that is also, that's individuals, that's people, that's work plans, that's, really defined job descriptions. In this case, I believe it was that we do have some union labor that's involved with that point at the courses. So I think we have to be very conscious of that point. So I would be inclined to add those 2 points within recommendation 1.
Okay.
The environmentally sustainable practices, golf management, and staffing.
Okay.
But again, that's,
Okay, looking at recommendation 1, are there any other additions that advisory committee members would want to add? That's good. Okay. What about recommendation 2? I think we wanted to add the date.
the June 2017, yes.
The natural resource management plan will be complete by June 2017.
Yes.
That's for the park-wide. I do have a hunch that, again, one of the early consulting groups I've been talking with, they'll be able to produce some portions of that for Elbel by yet this fall.
Okay. So we're
So
comfortable putting that.
by encompasses.
Yeah, right, exactly. Just so we're clear, we aren't going to wait on some of these things forever, so.
And then do we want to include cross-departmental collaboration there that was mentioned earlier, or kick that down to recommendation 3, or just involve city departments in recommendation 3? I'm jumping ahead, but.
That could come under 3, I think,
Okay.
because we're talking about key stakeholders.
So 2 is?
2 is adding the date. But, okay. 3, we're going to be adding cross-functional departments, or is that how you want it to be?
Interdepartment collaboration.
Interdepartment collaboration.
And then I don't know where this would go, perhaps 3, that's why I waited. But if we could add recommendation that we look specifically at that Audubon designation, what that would take and whether or not that could work, I think that would be well worth it.
And that would be part of
2, maybe? Would that be a benefit to 2?
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're looking,
Well, that's actually included, right?
it's the environmentally sustainable course maintenance.
Okay.
So that should go into 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can pick that up, I mean, that's been an ongoing theme, so we can pick that up as the work product of the Special Advisory Committee on Elbel, informing the consultants who are brought to the table. Okay. All righty. So 3 is, Karen,
Pretty
go
much.
ahead.
Okay. Recommendation 4.
Anybody want to address that? I heard the word consider, that maybe we need something stronger there versus the word consider. That, is to be very specific about an intention to do
How about you just
that.
cross out consider?
Okay.
Formation of.
Formation of. Okay.
Dan, this is an area I think that you've been most concerned with.
Yeah, this is a recommendation I'm going to make at next Monday's park board meeting.
Okay.
So I feel very comfortable with formation.
And one area that I don't know, I think we've heard the issue of ensuring, looking at the educational value, and including the educational, what's the word I'm looking for? As the stakeholders. Component, to look at that. And that probably could come under the stakeholders too. Under 3.
I'm just going to throw this out there as a matter of consideration. Really, when I think the gentleman was correct, we haven't really done a fairly we haven't really looked at that very closely.
Educational value.
The educational value. And then I think related to that is the idea of alternative use of the park. There's options to sell. There's options that we have had and discussed of splitting and, leaving room there for the Heinz Trust or Indiana Land Trust, to step in and fill a need. I'm wondering if we actually need another recommendation that allows that vein or that track to be followed. I don't know, I'm just putting that out there.
So I'm not sure we can pursue, so maybe we rewind a little bit. The whole idea was for us to come together and provide some recommendations to get all the information, get everybody on the same page, working from the same set of information, reboot a process that was messy from the start, and then make some recommendations to move it forward in a more healthy process. I think the recommendations we have do that. This doesn't give us the answers, though,
right,
of what we eventually do with the property, and that's going to have to go back through the channels that exist. If it's a sale to the Shirley Hines Land Trust, it's coming back to the council. If it's a sale to private developers, it's coming back to the council. If it's a in-house operation that we shift around operations a little bit to make it more efficient, that's a management decision. If it's a lease, it's a park board decision. I mean, those will all go back. Informed, though, any of those decisions will have to be informed off of all this data gathering. We're going to pour a significant amount of time and resources into these first 5 recommendations. It is not sending it back to the same process at all, and it's definitely not sending it back to the same people. So I feel like we've got with those first 5, a great set of recommendations, a whole new roadmap to go forward. And this maybe takes me one step forward to number 6 is,
Right.
I think we've got a template in place that has worked historically for decades in this city, as far as I can tell. And it failed once, it seems like, perhaps, but we've rebooted and we're setting up a whole new process to send it back to. And so,
Well, I'll even challenge that, and that the check was there by the council to say, no, we're not going to sell the property, and we're going to put together a committee.
So in a way, it did work how it was.
So in those terms, the process still worked, right? And so Aaron speaks to my earlier point, and when I hear things like, looking at staffing and those kinds of things, I mean, that's Aaron's purview now. And again, I think that gets us into the weeds a little bit in terms of, again, being more oversight than advisory. And I agree with Aaron that these, I think, are strong recommendations. And again, I trust the process from here, and certainly the people involved, that it will move ahead well and transparently. So again, maybe we're getting back to number 6.
Okay. So we're at number 6, right?
Actually, can we stick with 5? Because I don't want to miss other comments. I threw out the educational purpose, and that can happen outside of, or, be integrated, as things go forward and the public is involved. Certainly that can, percolate up. Just throwing that out there. Do we trust that will happen? Is there a structure? Is there a need to plant it in here? That's the question I'm popping out there. But moving on, recommendation 5, I heard tonight and have heard previously the goal or something that we want to maintain is the public access and the ecological integrity of the land. I mean, that should be, to me, that is an important piece to include here. And I would think recommendation 5 could accommodate that. If we could put I don't know if you want to say a goal or a hope.
Future use decisions deferred at this time, but will include public access and ecological integrity. That's fine. That's been a goal all along.
And I was going to say, I think there's been a consensus, but yet it was rightfully pointed out here, and I think we should pop that in.
So we'll include that in recommendation 5.
Public access and ecological integrity.
Okay. So looking back at recommendations 1 through 5, are we comfortable with the recommendations as we have amended those? We haven't voted on it yet, but we've made some, amendments to these various.
I think they're great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which brings us to recommendation 5, and there's really 3 parts to this. Six. I'm sorry, 6. Do we want to set all 3? Because we're just making a recommendation. I'm just trying to see where there's support. That's a thought out there.
Well, but it does impact how we move forward,
Mhm.
is the point. So we still have to decide what we're doing, regardless of what we recommend.
Well, if we don't make
That,
a-
we're in essence, we're recommending to ourselves.
If we don't make a recommendation, it just ends at the end of 45 days.
Well, that's right, too.
Right.
I think I would be inclined not to let's be really smart here. A is, really smart, but A is, for purposes of working together and sorting this out. A is the park board and the extension, okay? B is, go back to your corners, no, just kidding.
No, it's the
B is, really just pop this back into the respective park board.
But the one thing I want to comment on, Joe, you mentioned the updates I kind of interpreted progress reports as what you mentioned, which was these, as the consulting comes back, as these studies come back, these are going to be brought to the Parks Board. They're also brought to the Common Council, through the Park Committee. What you mentioned, I was kind of envisioning being those progress reports and just coming through the channels that are already set up.
Okay. So really as it exists, I'm going to name it B in terms of the options. 6B, 6A, 6B. So you're just emphasizing the progress reports are part of, okay.
Because when you described that, that's actually what I had in my head as just coming through the existing channel.
Okay, and then,
I would take that out.
Hybrid,
I would just take that out.
Yeah, take that out.
I think that's...
Okay, now I would look to amend 6A to be something very easy, is an extension through joint resolution, but based on input tonight, and obviously my preference is looking at 2 meetings, specifically thinking late, once the consultants are done with their work, but late fall, or late summer, early fall, kind of a rollout. This is what we know from the consultant work, and then a second meeting for an actual opportunity for the folks who have been tracking this to vote a recommendation based on the options that are put forth, from the consultants. So I would amend
what
that.
What further recommendations would you anticipate from that, other than what we have already?
What other recommendations?
Might you, envision once that report is done?
I would hope that after we engage a consultant on golf course management and they report out on all this information, I would hope that the purpose of our doing that the outcome would be some recommendations, lease, manage it yourselves, and that's not a decision that I see us making, but just as a group saying, that makes sense, or, instead of, making the, I'm not being very clear, I'm sorry.
I think I
understand.
But then as opposed to, again, those
Allow.
recommendations going to the park board and the park department and then coming to us and saying, hey, this is what we've determined from these, and us, even as a full council, then taking it from there. Again, we're existing structure, park committee to council.
Okay. That's the only, that's the amendment that I would make and that I would, have it stand. So it's not, burdensome, it's not a whole other ton of different meetings, but it does bring full circle our responsibility that we don't have the data, to make decisions within this 45 days. So to me, it's common.
There's going to be a lot of decisions to make after we get the data back.
Right.
Right, exactly.
there's going to be dozens, hundreds of decisions. I mean, they're going to tell us, you could price it this way, you could do it that way, you could do it this way. And I don't know if this committee structure is going to, a lot of those are going to be management decisions.
Oh, I
To make
agree.
those by committee are going to be really difficult. I mean, we can't decide on it.
That's my
You know, it's
point.
gonna
And
be
what
really
I would
difficult.
prefer then, at that point, is just like we do with so many other issues, is get a department briefing, in essence, a department recommendation on those things, and then decide as a council, as a park committee, and then through the council to move on from there. Because as Aaron points out, it's not going to be that cut and dry. There's going to be a lot of weeds.
Anybody else address it, and then we can move to vote, I guess.
Okay, I would probably say that, do we want to vote on all of the recommendations, or do we want to first take recommendations 1 through 5 as we have amended those recommendations and vote on those? And then 6 will be the last one that we would vote on, looking at option 6A or 6B. I don't know if that meets
It
the
strikes
pleasure.
me that they're separate enough, that really 6 has to do with the function of this
Yeah,
committee.
yeah, mhm.
So, yeah.
So would we want to, at this time, I think that, Joe, you're in the seat, so do you want to entertain a motion to accept the Special Advisory Committee on Elbel recommendations 1 through 5 as amended?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's take a motion. I'll entertain that.
So
Just do
moved.
them all as a
So
group.
moved, yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So, recommendations 1 through 5 are affirmed by this committee. And then,
And then I would make a motion that we would approve recommendation 6B with progress reports on a monthly basis to both the Park Council Committee and the Park Board.
I'll second that.
so should we take a vote on that?
You say it's been moved and seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. Thank you.
Mhm. All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay?
Nay. Is that a nay?
Mm-hmm.
So 2 nays, 3.
So, they have a majority. And 3 is the majority.
All right, so,
And then
Monthly
obviously,
progress
if
reports.
this isn't working, we can revisit this, right?
Yeah, but just make sure that the structure is clearly
Absolutely.
articulated and have ample opportunity to really look at that structure in regards to making sure that, the public and also the council and members of the advisory committee, we can chime in and really, if we see some things that can help clarify that,
Yeah.
hopefully, both entities will be open to
And
that
please,
report.
I would
Okay.
hope that any council member certainly
Yeah.
would come to me as part chair
Mhm.
if you feel like anything's missing or needs to be addressed or needs to be done.
And anytime you want to invite our board members or myself to that meeting, let us know that.
Monthly updates.
Fair enough. Good.
there we
I'll
go.
invite you monthly.
Okay,
Standing invitation.
good.
I don't see the word monthly in there, but I'll hold you to it.
Monthly,
All right.
I think I said that.
No,
Good.
I said monthly progress report. yeah.
All righty. How about just in terms of next steps, we need to take this back to our respective bodies. I do think, so Kathy, could you address that in terms of time frame you have, or maybe Aaron, your next meeting, or what we'll...
Just looking at the original resolution, because within that 45 days from the first meeting, you're to simultaneously send your recommendations to the mayor, to the council, and to the board.
So we need to get that done by the 15th,
Right.
something in...
2 days.
Today.
Jen, you're on that? Good, thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
There were also quite a few questions that have been posed by the public. I want to make sure that even going forward, that how do we clean that up? How do we address that? Where do we put that? Either written responses or a check off of what has been addressed heretofore.
I think we probably would need to go through the minutes and to pull out those questions that were asked and those that were addressed, and maybe just have a running list of just the questions and answers that will reflect the last 4 meetings, including, the meeting today.
And
That
any-
may be the best
And then any questions left unaddressed, or even some clarity that was needed, from tonight, we can kick that back to the respective bodies. Okay, good, all right. Any other items? I'll entertain a motion to disband.
Actually, before that, if I may, I would like to say a very special thanks to you who spearheaded this. And I think, I think the process worked very, very well. I know the public very clearly appreciate it, and I certainly do too as Chair of the Park Committee, and just want to thank you very, very much for all your efforts. Councilwoman White, you worked right by her side, so thank you both so much for spearheading this.
And thank you all for your service, and many, many thanks to the public who has been very involved in the process. We appreciate it. All righty. Good night.
I don't know what I'm going to do now that...
Your budget meetings are...
Thank you, sir. But really,
budget meetings.
I've been thrown from
They had this
DTSB.
new process, so I'm see how it's going to...
Priority-based.
Yeah, I'm going to see how it's going to go.
From what I understand, there's still state requirements, though, of the regular format.
We're going to have two formats, and make sure that the council's aware of these two processes.
It's a way to kind of look at,
It's a way to really make decisions about...
simplify what it costs to do what.
I may think I'm great doing my job, but the evidence... Sounds like it's a good job.
It's done.
And you may not be so,
Now, next year, Elbel is scheduled.
Oh, fantastic. Schedule and keep it on the calendar.
Yeah, okay, well, it'll be next year.
You better get your date this year.
Please do. We love your
It's very interesting. Side note, I know you're, but
I'm just looking at them.
you know what? Now, you know, what I have to say in a movie back.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to put a hotel right there, so.
My husband and I do.
I'm asking her to address it. I think that's fair, staff.
Set in stone yet, but it sounds like that.
They're not going to have support office. I mean,
I don't understand what's happening for.
Jen, you're awesome.
I stare at it when I'm up here. I wonder what.
They have it right.
I mean, this is the best collection.
John, thank you for your input. Appreciate it.
Nice course up there,
It's
yeah.
in one place. Oh, yeah. We've never had. We started with